This is a really important experience, and it's also meant to be a teaching experience for young workers who are becoming unionized and who are working towards, who are struggling for Palestine and who are fearful as well in how they're able to express themselves, especially in UC now, in the University of California. But let me take a step back, and I want to thank Lucila for for allowing us to meet Michael from the Peace Resource Center. That was the connection, and I just want to acknowledge that, Lucila. Thank you so much. Steve also has the Labor Video Project, which documents rank and file voices, and it's really important that all voices of union members be heard. One of the things that I wanted to discuss was how we, as different union members, have been dealing with the issue of Palestine, both internally and, of course, the actions that we've been able to take externally together with other union members. The whole objective of this meeting in particular, the reason why UPTE Members for Palestine decided to do it here in San Diego is because my union, UPTE, is having its convention tomorrow and the next day here in San Diego. And we're going to be presenting a resolution on Palestine. I'll be happy to pass that resolution along here so you can see it as well. My union passed a resolution back in 2021. I was part of the Peace and Social Justice Committee, and we presented it to the executive board, and it passed. And it was a very good resolution. It included also not only BDS, boycott, divestment, and sanctions, but it included ending U.S. aid and breaking ties with Histrodut. I'm not sure, how many people here know what Histrodut is? Okay. Histrodut is a Jewish supremacist trade association that was created in the 1920s before Israel was created, and it was created with the pretext of supporting Jewish labor in Palestine. I say pretext because in reality what it was doing was it was boycotting businesses that hired non-Jews. And it was specifically a Zionist project, a project that was meant to create a Zionist state and to ethnically cleanse Palestinians from that land. And this has been very, very well documented by Ilan Pappé, who is a Jewish Israeli writer in The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine. From the 1800s, this project started, but in particular, Histrodut was created with the support of the American Federation of Labor, not the AFL-CIO, but it was the American Federation of Labor before the CIO joined. And since then, and during the 60s as well, the American Federation of Labor, and then became the American Federation of Labor, CIO, has been involved in similar projects, settler colonial or basically serving as the right hand of US foreign policy, in particular in Chile. I'm Chilean, and it's pretty well documented that the American Institute of Free Labor Development, which was created by the AFL-CIO, and by the way, the CWA was very much involved in that as well. They basically helped to destabilize the Allende government by financing strikes against the Allende government in Chile. So we are all connected in that sense. And labor, unfortunately, we've been having to deal with labor imperialism for a long time. I call it labor imperialism, I call it also business unionism, because we're talking about profoundly anti-democratic actions that require rank and file participation in order to be able to combat. Okay, good. All right. So let's move on, because I don't want to take up their time. We didn't get an introduction from them before, but one of the reasons why we're joining together is because since the resolution that my union passed in 2021, I'm going to close off there. In 2021, when a new leadership came forward, that resolution was taken off, and then since then there has been not a complete silence, but a relative silence and a reprioritization of repriorities within my union. And so that's why we had to form UPTE Members for Palestine, so we could respond and participate that way. Okay. So I'm going to leave it here for a second. And I have documentation that I would be happy to share with you regarding what I'm talking about. But the idea here is to be able to present a resolution at our union tomorrow, which we will, but also primarily to be able to fight together and to demand that our unions defend us from this onslaught. Because people are getting fired, people are getting attacked, and we need union unity. We need the unity in the rank and file. We need the unions to respond. And so far, there's only very few that have actually responded. And one of them is the UAW, for example, in the way that they defended their members from the police repression. Experience that happened on April 29th. In fact, I was a member of the San Francisco Labor Council on the part of UPTE, and within that Labor Council, we organized to try to pass a resolution on Palestine. But it was tabled, and then we got a letter from the AFL-CIO basically prohibiting us from even discussing it, right? We're talking about 2021, right? Well, a year later, 2 years later, what was going on was that, during the Oakland schools, there was like a whole bunch of schools that were, hundreds of schools that were planning on shutting down, right? Dozens rather, not hundreds, sorry. And a very important labor community alliance was formed, because it was the same people that were attacking the schools was the same people that were attacking the ILWU Local 10, because it was Don Fisher from the Gap. So the reason I'm mentioning is because those are very powerful things. On April 29th, it culminated on the ILWU having a port shutdown at the same day in solidarity with the teachers who did a major strike in Oakland. That was April 29th. Don Fisher from the Gap, it was during the whole A's Stadium debacle. Remember the A's Stadium? He was trying to take over the waterfront, basically, because he wants to construct these condominium. He wanted to get a hold of that land, and part of it was getting rid of Howard Terminal, which was the ILWU, is the area, the training space of the ILWU. The bad thing is that the rest of a lot of the labor councils, including the Alameda and the San Francisco Labor Council, they sided with Don Fisher because they were promising quote unquote jobs, right? I got into trouble at the Labor Council because I was announcing the incredible the Labor and Community Alliance that was formed, which was called Schools and Labor Against Privatization. So those kind of links, community labor alliances, are really important, and it's an area that we know that, for example, there's plans on shutting down some schools in San Francisco, and we know why they're shutting down schools. The money's going to kill Palestinians. That's where the money's going. So I think that it's really important to create these links between what's going on here and what's going on in Palestine. And I don't know if people realize or people know, I'm sure everybody here does, but it's very important to give information about the Palestinian trade unions and what they're actually asking of us, to our members. Rank and File needs to know that they're asking us to break ties with the occupation trade unions. They're asking us to break ties with Institute. They did this in this document. They've done this. This was the May 1st appeal to the American unions directly, American unions. And this was the September 11th one as well. And that's really important. One of the things that I wanted to touch upon before I forget is the role of UC is really important. Anybody who remembers anything about what happened during South Africa, UC was very central to that. And the fact that when UC came down, and UC has gotten much more stronger since then. Obviously, it's, I think, the second highest employer in the state of California, or third. It's very much involved in the military-industrial complex. In fact, we probably have union members who, as part of the national law, the laboratory is probably involved in Department of Defense work as well, probably. Okay, I can't confirm. But the role of the IT sector and the fact that CWA has a union called the Alphabet Workers Union, who are the Google workers who are opposing Project Nimbus. Project Nimbus is being used to attack journalists by tracking them down and following them until they get home to kill them and their children. That there's this program software called Where's Daddy, that they call it Where's Daddy. And we have workers who are in the IT sector, and those workers, for example, got fired, and we really need our unions to step up to the plate and defend the workers. In San Francisco, we had a whole group of people that luckily that took over the Golden Gate Bridge. The Golden Gate Bridge 26, they're called. Okay, they also did the same thing that Christine was mentioning. UCSF lied and said that they had blocked the police. They said they had blocked all the lanes and that a transplant van could not go through. That was bullshit. Excuse me, language, because the APEC. It was during the same. It was. It was during. It was during the APEC conference, and so any transplants were going to be transferred via helicopter. There was no plans of doing any kind of transporting via by ground because of the APEC conference, and the highway, that lane was never shut down. It was actually the police that had shut down that lane, not the protesters. They left one lane, and they were allowing, the emergency vehicles to go through. But now they're facing felony charges and false imprisonment. False imprisonment, by the way, is being leveled by the Zionists by saying those who could not cross, they were falsely imprisoned. Okay, so they're facing felony charges, criminal charges, and we're asking our DA, Brooke Jenkins, to drop the charges. And so I'm going to be sharing that information with everyone here as well. And besides that, there's also a petition to support the CARE director, Diane Carmaggi, who got fired at UCSF as well. So that's sort of information that I wanted to put out.
Every single one of the UCs has a different character, and UCSF is the medical campus, and San Diego is the military campus, and I heard the question about, what kind of argument can you make to someone whose livelihood depends upon the military imperialism of the United States? And so, I think that's
recording in progress.
Okay, go.
I think that's an incredibly tough question. On the one hand, there's like the kind of ideological way in which US wars have been presented as democratizing opportunities. They haven't been. But you have these like World War II icons like Rosie the Riveter that are held out, as though like war gives, you know, it gives women our rights. It gives it gives minoritized immigrant labor its rights. It gives, whatever. Like there's a kind of democratizing fiction around militarism, suggesting that from this comes a lot of democratic good. But it's just as what Steve was saying, there has to be education around the fact that militarism actually doesn't benefit. It's not only the majority of the world that's impacted, it's also the majority of people in the United States. And I want to say a couple of things about this. In the university, compared to the 1960s, in the 1960s, during a time of U.S. genocidal war in Vietnam, there was a kind of crisis of conscience within STEM fields. We are not seeing that right now. That is not happening. There are graduate students and postdocs who are willing to put their names to petitions. But by and large, we are not seeing a movement among the kind of R&D academic arm of the military-industrial academic complex at all reflecting upon the lethal impact of the work that they do. I mean, it's a real question. I just want to raise this. And I wanted to say, too, that, this is something that I have seen Steve do over the years. There really has to be education that brings in the kind of impact that the proliferation of the war machine has on the rest of the world. So, for example, in the Santa Cruz Mountains, there's a branch of Lockheed Martin. And that Lockheed Martin in the Santa Cruz Mountains, it specializes in THAAD. That is Terminal High Altitude Area Defense. And if you all remember last October, Israel paused for a moment before invading Gaza. Why? It paused because it was waiting for for fortified THAAD deployment from the United States. That's produced by Lockheed Martin. That brief pause was because of that. I know that Steve knows this. In Korea, when you think about THAAD deployment, you think about the displacement of farm workers in Korea. So farm workers in Seoseongni have been fighting for years against THAAD deployment. And in fact, someone even self-immolated. There was someone who self-immolated to protest the THAAD deployment. So in order for there to be any kind of education, there has to be international solidarity in terms of the impact of the war machine all around the world. And I wanted to say, someone was speaking about Denise Caramagno at UCSF. There's a chopping block order in terms of whose head rolls. Denise's staff. So her head has rolled. And, tenure track professors are somewhat protected, not so much in this moment. But this is all the more the reason there has to be solidarity, not only across borders, but even within institutions across different ranks. There has to be solidarity. There has to be work around this. And we can see this actually with students and workers. AFSCME on different campuses have helped to cultivate organizations like, I forget what it's called at UCLA, but at Santa Cruz it's called WISC. It's the Worker Student Solidarity Coalition. And I just wanted to say that, like, when we were being placed on school buses to be transported to the police station after we were arrested, the bus drivers allowed people who had not been allowed to go to the bathroom for something like 18 hours to urinate in the back stairwell of the buses. I mean, it was an act of mercy, actually. And the students who were on the bus, they were the ones who were fighting for those bus drivers because they were driving these antiquated vehicles. And a bus driver last year at Santa Cruz crashed and was killed in a bus accident. So there's all sorts of like lines right now in terms of organizing of possible solidarity, as well as the kind of weird intractability of STEM right now.
People live in a bubble, you know, and there's been this reluctance to address things. In other words, even though there is, you know, healthcare workers for Palestine, and there's, you know, UPTE members for Palestine, and there's many different groups, there seems to be like a reluctance to work within your own union, but rather people tend towards affinity groups instead of unions themselves. And that's something that we, UPTE Members for Palestine, are trying to break with. We're trying to, you know, put emphasis within our unions so that our unions actually works in collaboration with the students and in collaboration with the faculty and in collaboration with other unions as well. I have to say, you know, looking at what has been going on is that there's, for example, one of the members of the Golden Gate 26 is a nurse, but, you know, her union is not, apparently, as of yet, not defending her. And so, I mean, people can lose their licenses to practice, you know, and they're facing a lot of difficulty. So, what you're saying basically, Christina, is that Diane is a staff member, but she won't be the last. And the only thing that we need to do is we need to organize together with the students and with faculty, but also not only within our affinity groups, but rather within our unions as well, so that we can move this along and move our leadership along as well.